We've got to take you back to Hong Kong and take a look at the live pictures that are coming in, because it is turning violent. And we've been having the discussion all day here at Yahoo Finance, yesterday as well. If this does escalate, does the Chinese government send in the People's Liberation Army to restore order? Rick had pointed out that they most likely, if that happened, would not interfere with the day-to-day operations of the financial institutions that are headquartered in Hong Kong. But the Chinese government now in a position where it's going to have to show that it does have some kind of control. As of right now, we have been watching the live pictures from Hong Kong as things become more violent at the airport. And again, this is just streaming as it comes in. And these protests, we should point out too, go back, it's more than 2 months, and it started with a piece of legislation that the government in Hong Kong was considering that would have allowed the Chinese government to extradite people from Hong Kong for trial in China. Essentially, pro-democracy protesters could have been extradited to China to stand trial. I mean, as you watch this, Rick, what are your thoughts?
I mean, that's not the extradition bill is a pretext, I think, for these protests. I mean, this sentiment has been roiling for a while, and we saw angry protests a couple of years ago, remember, over other things. This all has to do with how much China is going to impose hardline communist rule on Hong Kong at what point in the future. I mean, it is supposed to, the deal is when China took Hong Kong back from the UK in, I think, 1999, right? Mm-hmm. The deal was it would operate as an autonomous part of China under the same rules it had been operating, which is basically Western-style democracy.
They've been tightening the grip.
Right.
Well, exactly.
Right.
So they found, as we were seeing Hong Kong become more China-ized, for lack of a better word, that you're seeing more unrest. And so we're seeing the protesters there sort of barricade themselves in the airport using the luggage carts. The police have been confronting them. Earlier, we were showing you the protesters shining laser pointers in the eyes of the police. So initially, the protests were largely peaceful, but as we have seen them persist, we've seen some of the tensions being ratcheted up.
And also, the U.S. administration is obviously paying very close attention to the protests. They're looking at this too.
But taking a hands-off approach.
A hands-off approach, but the State Department has shown support for the protesters, saying that they respect their right to freedom of speech. Of course, it's Hong Kong. China's a different country. When it comes to free speech, it's a different story.
If you're Xi Jinping, your worst nightmare is that it's actually that this spreads to mainland China in some fashion. I think the Chinese must realize that the Tiananmen massacre in 1992 was a losing move. That actually shows how weak a country is, not how strong it is. When you have to strong-arm your own people with your own military, you are not a world power. You're a banana republic.
And we think of China as one country, but it's really so many different regions within one country. And we've seen the protests from the Muslim sectors. We're going to keep an eye on this because it's clearly having an impact.
Remarkable video.
It's a remarkable video, but it's it's remarkable that it's individuals putting their lives on the lines to stand up for, I would like to believe, freedom and the right to self-determination.